This is deep dish, right?
Yeah, well, let's get deep.
So I'm going deep on both sides.
Matt, welcome to the platform. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm great. It's good to be here with you.
I've seen you a lot over the years.
Yes.
We've been at the festivals,
Bunch
and
of places.
races, and community events and stuff like that. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
You've been running for mayor almost a year.
Right.
Dive right into it. So I'm really excited just to unpack, what you as our potential next mayor may look like.
Sure.
And give you the opportunity to let Nashvilleians and potential voters also know kind of what you as mayor would look like for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and let me say too, thank you for this.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit before we went on air.
Yeah.
That there are a number of candidates running. Really only one. Your viewers only need to look at one candidate, but there are a bunch of candidates who have their names on the ballot. And out of respect for the democratic process, which is important, everyone should have a time to speak and be able to speak their mind. But there is this tension, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got a dozen people running and there's only so much time, it necessitates really short time periods to address what I think are really complex issues that our city's facing. And so thank you for creating this opportunity for folks who want to learn a little bit more and delve into the issues. Deep Dish, get a chance to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's so many new residents here, right?
Sure.
That may not be familiar with your past work or other of the candidates' past work over the years, right? So I just think it's really important and crucial that we get this right. And if we don't, I don't know.
I agree. Hey, look, I'm staking the next eight and a half years of my life on this, so I agree.
Let's get into I think the question that everybody probably asks you, why run for mayor now?
Sure.
Let's go ahead and just get that out the wall. You have a historical great record of just community economic development, MDHA, as far as housing, public, private, nonprofit sector work, right? Worked in the mayor's office for our last three mayors, previous three mayors. So you're really good at what you do, great. So why the transition you want to take on this role where we know what comes with it? Accessibility is a little different to you. Those who like you and don't like you, it's a little different as well.
Able to share it?
Yeah, so unpack that for us a little bit.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. So as you mentioned, I got into the race about a year ago at this point, 9 months. And as I looked around the city, it just seemed like there were a lot of things that just weren't working right. I sort of take a bit of a moment here to take a step back. My background, for those folks who don't know it as much, born and raised in Nashville, grew up here. My professional story, I worked in the private sector for 15 years, in San Francisco for a couple of years, in New York for 6 or 7 years, and then here in Nashville for 6 or 7 years. And I love that job in finance, working on complex transactions with really interesting big problems, but it just wasn't feeding my soul. And I looked around the city, and we'll talk a little bit more about that transition, I imagine. I looked around the city, this was a time when unemployment in Nashville was over 8%, and just felt like the talents and the skills that I had could be better applied to actually improve the city that I loved.
Right.
And so I left that career, which I really enjoyed, and moved to the mayor's office. And then, as you mentioned, I spent 8 years doing that job. We had a lot of success, added 42,000 jobs for Nashvilleians, and had a great experience. I loved that job. Selling the city I love.
Right.
But in 2019, as I looked around the city, I saw that there were a lot of other challenges, and I thought that I should apply whatever I'd learned to that point in my career to take on the challenge of affordable housing. And I spent 3 years doing that, and I would love to talk about what MDHA is doing.
Yeah.
That work, I think, is really important. And I am as passionate today as I was the day I joined MDHA, the day I left MDHA, for the really great work that they're doing to transform areas of concentrated poverty into thriving mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods. And so I love that. But the reason I left, so now after that little 2 minutes of background, the reason I chose to run is because it just felt like there were a lot of things that weren't working right in our city. And we'll talk about many of those, I imagine. But it wasn't what I thought I would do, but it just felt like, man, there's a lot of stuff that we can be doing better.
Yeah.
Right? Things that are impossible, you don't spend a lot of time worrying about, right? I wish I was 6'7", had a 40-inch vertical leap, and could hit 35%, 40% from three.
Right.
Then I'd be in the NBA.
Right.
But I'm not, and that is never going to happen.
Right.
But these are things, potholes in the streets, trash pickup. Those are things that don't have to be broken.
Right.
That I think we can fix.
Just basic things, right?
Basic things.
Quality of life
That's
things. Right. For those who may not understand the role of the mayor,
Yeah.
or maybe that understanding may be different, right? And what success looks like, right? It kind of talk to us being able to work in the mayor's office as well for 8 years. You have a different perspective and lens than many of us who maybe never even been to the mayor's office or really never just paid attention outside of like when the budget comes out.
Right.
And now we want to see the mayor, right? What does a successful mayor from your lens look like?
Yeah.
And what does that mayor kind of need to look like in the next 4 years and you potentially being that next mayor?
That is a really great question. And you mentioned candidate forums, we were talking about that.
Yeah.
That's not a question that's been asked. And I think it's a really important question. Mm-hmm. And again, to set the table here, why? Well, you and the 705,000 residents of Davidson County are looking to hire a CEO.
Right.
You guys are the interview board to hire a CEO of a really complex organization. Mm-hmm. Metro, as you probably know, but some of your viewers may not fully appreciate, has a $3 billion budget.
Right.
17,000 employees between Metro and schools. 56 different departments that do everything from educate people, arrest people, issue permits, have libraries, run parks. I mean, it's a really complex organization. And there are, on top of that, 81 boards and commissions. So it's a big, super complex organization. I submit that you all, as the interviewers, should be looking for someone who's prepared to be the CEO of a $3 billion enterprise. And you hope that that person has some experience in the organization, has some experience in executive leadership. And so I think that's a really important question. For me, it's about someone who can manage a large organization but isn't micromanaging. Okay. Someone who can bring people together. So we talked about how big and complex Metro is, but the reality is to take on the big challenges we're facing as a city, Metro cannot do it alone. We need to work with the state. We need to work with the nonprofit sector. We need to work with the many great companies that are here in Nashville because we got some big challenges we're trying to take on, and Metro can't do it alone, so we need to bring everybody together. I think a good mayor will do a good job of managing Metro and the budget, be a little bit of an auditor, but mostly a manager, but will also bring people together so that there's alignment between the nonprofit sector, the public sector, the corporate sector to get things done.
Right, convener.
A convener.
Yeah, and that's kind of been my one of my biggest takes as I try to drop little gems here and there to potential voters of kind of what we should be looking at as we're interviewing and going out and checking out prospective mayors, because it's like you can't just have one of those experience. Like, okay, you just was a leader in some executive company. That's your whole career, right?
Right.
That's great, but
Sure.
what is that convening part? Like, well, have you worked with nonprofits and grassroots and the private, public? Like, have you done that? Budgets and things like that. And so, voters, listen to these things and look and listen to what our candidates are saying or not saying when it comes to these things. So I appreciate you kind of spreading that out in detail to really unpack that and also highlighting why you're qualified. And leads me kind of to my next question of like, why do you feel you are the best qualified? This is where I guess you can always use some tension against saying that you're better or for the best in somebody when it comes to a position, a job, or whatever. But it's a question I think people want to know. Like, what makes you, what separates you the best candidate from all the other 20, 30, 40, whoever's running at this particular moment in time?
Hey, look, it's still a little bit until May 18th. There may be 5 more who jump in between here and there.
Crazy.
I don't want to talk too much. You may be pulling your papers here before too long. We're going to reverse this. There aren't many people who know as much about Metro as you do, so I'd be worried if you got on the ballot.
I'll be like, gotcha.
Gotcha. Yeah, exactly.
Got everybody gotcha now.
That's right. I mean, look, I even when I announced 9 months ago, I wasn't running against anybody. I'm running for Nashville. Now, a lot of politicians say that. I mean, it's true. I am putting forward some ideas. But you asked why I am sort of someone who your viewers should choose.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are feeling that right now. Like, my goodness, there's a bunch of great candidates out there. How the heck am I supposed to choose between them?
Right.
I submit a few things. One, you want someone who actually has some knowledge of Metro, right? 4 years goes by really fast. And if you have somebody who's still having to learn the difference between EMS and fire, or where the codes department is, that's just days that go by that citizens aren't being served as well as they should. I think I have that experience. I have that experience. I know the folks in Metro. But it's also someone who has executive leadership experience, right? Managing and knowing when to get involved and when to step back. How to empower people and hold them accountable, but give them the resources that they need to be able to do the job that you've agreed that they're going to do. I think that balance is really important. But this isn't a dictatorship, right? You're not directing people. You have to work with people. You have the opportunity to work with people. Those 17,000 dedicated employees within Metro, but the many hundreds of companies outside. And I have an experience, again, having done that, worked not just with the private sector, but with the state.
Right.
And we'll talk, I'm sure the state's going to come up. It should. It
should,
better.
yeah.
It will.
Has
but
to.
like, I have experience working with folks in the state. Like, I've actually done it.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I'm given the pitch from the Matt Wiltshire perspective, but I think the things you laid out are exactly the things that folks ought to be thinking about.
Yeah. And you said, it can be difficult to pick a candidate if you're not aware of the things to look for. And so one thing I try to tell people is like yourself, right? If you go to Matt's website, you kind of see the top priorities. And it's a lot of priorities, but we all kind of understand maybe some of the dire ones that all of our mayoral candidates should be focused on, right? And if you go to a mayoral candidate's website and they don't have something on there that we all know it should be on there, I think that's a red flag to me, right? And then, but that's also an opportunity for us as voters to say, hey, I looked at your website, I see that you didn't have X, Y, and Z on there. Is that a reason why? Are you not thinking about this? So those little things I think should help voters, and that's why we have this conversation, right? And that's why I urge everybody to just
dig deep.
To dig deep into those, because those can be the separating things. But you got to just know to look for them and ask for them.
Sure.
And I want to get into those nuanced things, right? It's on your website. People can go and look at them and kind of unpack and examine all of those things and give you a chance to really fully explain kind of initiatives, plans, and why these things are important to you, but also important for Nashville to move forward in a just and equitable way for the future. And let's start with housing, right? You just left MDHA. You was there
3 years.
3 years. We all understand the affordable housing crisis that we're in at the moment. 30 to 50,000 units, I think we need possibly at this moment in time. How do you plan, if elected mayor, to address that need and kind of unpack because again, you have a different lens, especially from a private-public relationship, and I always hear that's what's going to be needed to really put some type of Band-Aid over this housing crisis that we go through. Unpack that, examine that for us from your perspective, and again, you have the time to really walk us through and give us a master class.
Yeah. Well, look, this is one of those topics. Although actually, I suspect each one of the things we talk about will fall into this. But like in these candidate forums, it's like crime, 1 minute, go. Like you can't get into these complex issues.
Yeah.
But affordable housing actually starts from a really simple place.
Okay.
The cost of any good, those earphones, a home, a car, is based on really two things: supply and demand.
Right.
Now, there's a couple other things. What does it cost to make the earphones?
Right.
You can't sell them for less than it costs to make them, or at least you can't sell them for that price for very long. But it's basically supply and demand. And the reality is the cost of housing in Nashville is primarily because there has been a tremendous increase in demand for housing here without a matching increase in supply.
All right.
So where we sit today, we've got a couple of choices. We could either bring that demand down, which is only going to be by making Nashville a crappier city. I don't
Right.
think any of us wants that.
Exactly.
We don't want Nashville to be a less attractive place to live, to raise our kids, to age.
Right.
So we don't want to lower the demand, so we got to raise the supply. That's it. That's the only way to do it. And we don't want to, I think most of us don't want to raise supply in a way that overwhelms and transforms. We don't want tall and skinnies on every lot in all of Nashville.
Right.
I mean, that would double the amount of housing here,
Right.
but it would be a pretty unattractive place to live.
Very dense.
So, right, we need to add housing in places where we can grow in a way that makes sense. So for me, that means adding housing primarily along transit corridors to make the mass transit work better. It's all connected, like Carl Dean said. It's all connected. So we need to add housing. There are also, I think, some really important ways. So MDHA, if I may, I'll take just a couple minutes.
No, it's deep this conversation, but it's the Matt show at this
Great.
moment. Yeah.
Well, I think, look, 95% of the solution needs to come from the private sector because the private sector owns and operates 95% of the housing in Nashville. I mean, individuals and
Right.
their privately owned residences and apartment buildings. We need more supply to match the demand. But I think there are things that we can do with public assets.
Okay.
MDHA owns a bunch of great dirt. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Casey Place, Casey Homes over in East Nashville, Edge Hill, which is located near, essentially between the Gulch and 12 South, near Vanderbilt and Belmont. Andrew Jackson, which is right adjacent to Fisk. Cheatham Place, which is up in Germantown area. Cumberland View, Napier and Sudicum, which are along Murfreesboro Pike, Lafayette, heading south. So there are great locations that MDHA has. Those have been areas of concentrated poverty. And what we don't want to do is move people out.
Right.
Now, there are some examples of that I think were done with well-intended ways. So John Henry Hale over on Charlotte.
Right.
That was a pretty tough place to live when I was growing up here. And that area, through the Hope 6 program, was changed. But the way it was changed was everyone there was given a voucher to go find another house somewhere else.
Right.
And then they bulldozed it.
Right.
And what they replaced it with was much lower density. You've seen it. When you
Right.
drive up and down Charlotte,
Exactly.
beautiful homes. John Henry Hale is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the families who live there generally love their experience. I know that because the turnover is about 1%, right? Folks are having a good experience there.
Right.
But there just aren't very many units. There
Right.
aren't as many units given the footprint there. And we mentioned supply and demand.
Right.
Okay. So the Envision Plan at MDHA transform areas of concentrated poverty by increasing it and transforming it into mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods. Those kinds of approaches to the complex problems that we're facing today as Nashville is what we need the next mayor to do. And I'm prepared to do that.
I want to go ahead and circle into. Well, before I circle into this, funding for that housing. We had the Barnes Fund, but hey, we only have so much money in the Barnes Fund.
That's right.
Where do we pull other monies and funds? How do we get creative? Is there prospective ways to get creative to either pour back into the Barnes Fund or find money elsewhere that we could, potentially, build a home full of stadiums?
Yeah. This is where I think the mayor, we've talked a little bit about public-private partnerships. It's
Yeah.
kind of a catchphrase.
Right.
But let me talk specifically about what I've done. So at MDHA, I got Amazon to invest $7 million in the last development that we did there.
Okay.
Right. The private sector, not every company,
Right.
but certain companies on certain issues want to be involved, want to help provide solutions.
Right.
And affordable housing was an issue, a big issue for Amazon. They announced about 2 years ago now that they were going to invest $2 billion in 3 cities in affordable housing. And within 30 days, I had a plan developed within MDHA where Amazon could invest $300 million in Nashville. But the process just got dragged out with a bunch of folks wanting to look at the numbers and reevaluate the numbers and change the numbers within different parts of government, and it just wasn't a helpful process.
Right.
We need to be prepared to move quickly to take advantage of opportunities that are put in front of us. So part of it will be government investment to get the flywheel spinning.
Right.
But the great news is there are economically self-sustaining models that having great dirt enables you to create. We need to get the flywheel moving, and then we can get leverage OPM.
Right.
Other people's money.
Other people's money.
OPM.
Right.
Federal dollars, private dollars. I think there are a lot of opportunities to do that.
Right.
We just have to be aggressive and creative about going out and making those things happen. And we haven't been for too long.
You mentioned mobility.
Yes.
Right. We all have to drive through this traffic. And I would say transit and affordability go hand in
Connected
hand.
to each other.
Connected to each other, right? We had a referendum in 2018 that failed.
It was very close, very close. 65-35.
You know, close, you know. It was close, Nashville. And now, you know, as potentially our next mayor, we could actually, you know, it can be up for another vote. And we need that referendum so we can, you know, have access to those tax dollars, right? Outside of, you know, a mayor just saying, okay, we're going to do transit, but property tax is going to be the tax I'm pulling from, right? Because nobody wants to have an increase in property tax. Voters don't want to do that. So we had the referendum, it failed. So here we are now, still without mass transit. You know, we have potholes, you know, lack of sidewalks, all of these things that, you know, that deals with mobility and access, right? Because that's what we talk about. We talk about access, which goes into equality, equity for me. As our next potential mayor, how do you tackle, address, be transparent, and how do we get to this place to where we can not just have a plan, but actually, you know, be proactive and implement something. May not be the whole city, but a community, a stretch of road, or something that, you know, for us Nashvillians that's been here, that lived here, that's from here, used to drive our cars, and maybe need more convincing, and maybe we just need to see it. Say, oh, this is convenient, this is affordable, this is actually efficient, it saves me money. Let's talk about that infrastructure piece of it.
Dude, it's like you're giving my campaign speech. I should just be quiet and let you give it. I mean, a few things real quick. I mean, we need to have a long-range plan, and we need to commit to that plan, and it needs to survive mayoral administrations. There have been so many plans. Plan to play, affordable housing plans, transit plans.
Yeah.
That should survive beyond mayors.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that we don't pivot.
Yeah.
We should reevaluate our plans and like, okay, we were going this direction, but we need to go a little bit different direction. But we don't need to recreate the wheel every 4 years.
Yeah.
So let me tell you, well, we're going to start this year.
Okay.
This year. Elected mayor, we will start it this year, and I've already started working on it, and we will be able to fund it. So I don't know if you've ever been to Denver or not.
I have.
But the Denver airport, I think, is located somewhere in Kansas. I mean, it's like way outside of town. But they've got light rail from the airport to downtown.
Okay.
Our airport is only located 7 miles from downtown.
Right.
So we have an opportunity to do something transformational that will, to your words, create momentum, right? And show that this can work. It makes it tangible so that we can then build out the rest of the skeleton for the infrastructure that we need for cities. So I think that we need to build mass transit from the airport to downtown.
Okay.
And we can do it. We can do it, Nashville. And here's why. The 55 Murfreesboro is already the highest ridership bus line in Nashville, already today, which means that a project like this will be well positioned to receive funding from the federal government.
Okay.
Second, the airport, which is booming, busting at the seams, can pay for all of the infrastructure from the airport to the first transit stop. And we've already tried to do some things like this in the past. You may remember the AMP back in 2012, 2013.
Yep.
That got shut down because opponents said there's not enough right-of-way available. Well, there's a lot of right-of-way available on Murfreesboro Pike. There's up to Boulevard, there's right-of-way available, and there's redevelopment opportunities along Murfreesboro Pike where we can have affordable housing and small businesses, jobs for people located there so that folks who work downtown or work out at the airport, which is a big employer, can get to work without paying $50 for parking, right? There are opportunities to do this. So by investing in transit, getting the federal government to pay for a piece, getting the airport to pay for a piece, getting the folks who are going to use it to pay for a piece, and then getting an increase in property tax values to pay for the piece that the city's paying for, we can have mass transit starting with the planning process this year. It's
Right.
going to take a while to build it out.
Yeah.
Those are jobs, by the way.
Yeah.
Building it out, those are jobs for Nashvillians.
Yeah.
And then what we can create is mass transit to prove that it can be successful and then get momentum from there. I'll start that this year.
What are your thoughts on dedicated funding for transit?
I think we do need it. To be able to build a big network infrastructure, we need dedicated funding. I don't think the city's ready for that, to be perfectly honest. Not this year.
Okay.
I mean, as you mentioned, the referendum law 65-35. So I think we need to build momentum.
Okay.
And build the excitement around it. I think we got to go with certain steps to prove
Okay.
this thing out. I think we need it if we want to build an overall infrastructure,
Right.
but I don't think the city's ready for it this year.
Okay. Before we move on to the next big pillar, I like throwing these phrases or words that it just all gets, especially if it's around social change, community, and I think it's very important to understand how our potential next mayor thinks about these particular things, right? I mean, just give your definition on them.
Sure.
So, what comes to your mind when you hear systemic change?
Yeah.
We always hear change, but systemic change is a little different, especially for things that have been historically neglected or have been just unfair, inequalities. And so just curious of what that means, systemic change to you, and how that plays a role into potentially being the next mayor and shifting things that maybe have been embedded in systemic racism, discrimination to create this systemic change.
Yeah. I think we need to have an honest conversation about this stuff. I mean, not you and me. We are having it.
Yeah, we have one right now, yeah.
Society needs to have an honest conversation about this.
Okay.
Because I think so often people get real defensive real fast, right? There are systemic structures.
Right.
And anyone who doesn't believe that, I want to have a long, honest conversation with them.
Yeah.
I want to listen to them and understand them. We are all the hero in our own stories, right? We are all the heroes. But the honest answer is there are structures and systems, and those structures have inequalities in them.
Right.
I don't want to blame anybody for that. I think there were some bad intentioned people back in the past who set these things up, but they're honestly there. And those systems and structures dictate how a lot of things happen, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? The game is the game, and in this case, the game is society. And one of those is, I'll give you an example, right? The tuition to go to some of the elite private schools in our city, it's like $34,000, $35,000 a year.
Right.
We are spending, it was $14,000. I think that may be up a little bit in the mayor's latest budget. I got to go run the math on that, but maybe up to $15,000. Okay, so it's $35,000 to go to these private schools. Mm-hmm. It's $15,000 for our public school kids, every kid in Metro Nashville Public Schools. On top of that, a lot of the kids who were going to Metro Nashville Public Schools, not every kid.
Right.
My son graduated from Hillsborough last year, had an awesome time. He brought in some traumas to school, but not every kid brings in every trauma. Every kid is different.
Right.
But it is true that a lot of the kids in Metro Nashville Public Schools are facing different challenges than some of the kids in some of these private schools, right? There are 144 languages spoken in the homes of kids who are Metro Nashville Public Schools.
Right.
I don't think that's true in our private schools. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's a benefit and a strength of our city, the diversity of our city. But the reality is there's a lot more challenges for these kids, and we're spending $14,000, $15,000 a year on each one of the kids in Metro Nashville Public Schools. That is a structural inequity.
Right.
Either you think the parents who choose to send their kids to these elite schools and pay $35,000 a year to do it are morons,
Right.
and I don't think that they are, or you think that there's a return on their investment.
Right.
And that return on their investment is better opportunities for their kids. Now, I am not coming on your show to say that we ought to increase the school's budget by 2.5 times, right? I'm not here to say that today, but I am saying we have to be honest about the structural inequities in our systems and who that has benefited and who has been starting, This ain't starting a 100-meter dash. Everybody's at the same starting line.
Right. No. Some people are already at the finish line.
I mean, at least at 30
Right,
meters.
right.
I mean, I don't know.
No, and I'm glad that was a great example, one, but also just when you talk about systemic change, people do get a little, uncomfortable, but like that's the
It's
reality.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, but that's the reality of it, and being able to have a conversation about it and understand, okay, we speaking about this in the same language, and we understand that this thing exists, right? Then I think we can start working towards building stronger and better communities for everyone. And you will always have people. I think those people who just don't want that will always just be there. They'll just do what they do.
And most people, honestly, like, probably aren't even thinking of it that way.
Right.
Like, they aren't thinking about this as, hey, like, I want to screw all these other people. They
Right.
aren't thinking about it that way. They're thinking
Right.
about it like, look, I am doing what is in the best interest
Right.
of my child.
Right.
And they should.
Right.
I just think as a society, we're all better off. And here's the way I think about it. Today, there is a girl who lives at Casey Homes
Right.
who would have the potential to write the next amazing movie or app
Right.
or book, right? She may not ever have that opportunity because of the structural inequities.
Right.
And there are kids other places who are going to have the opportunity to fulfill their full potential, whatever that potential is that God gave them.
Right.
I do not believe today that every child in Nashville has the full opportunity to honor God's gifts and fulfill their full potential, whatever that is.
Right.
If you believe that is the case, that is the structure, that our system is set up so that every child has the equal opportunity to fulfill their full potential today, I would love to have a conversation with you about that. I suspect you don't think that's the case, but there may be someone out there who does, and I would love to listen and learn from them.
Yeah.
That's not how I see the world right now.
I'm black in America, Matt. I don't think that's the case. But I think I want to go. That kind of leads right into the next pillar, I think, of just the investment in communities, right? And what role can the mayor's office play in not perpetuating systemic harm and just the systemic damages that's just maybe been going on and on and on and on? How do we tackle that in our communities? How do we invest in our communities to make sure that little girl in Casey Homes can thrive or has some type of programming or something there where she can go on and code the next Facebook app? Or the kid in Cheatham or North Nashville, South Nashville, West Nashville, all over the community, right? Black, brown, poor, Latinx, immigrant, refugee, all of those different dynamics and makeups that we have here in Nashville.
So you're asking questions and I'm giving answers.
Yep.
But let me say this, because it's really, really important. Like, I'm giving you answers because I'm asking for your vote.
Right.
And I owe you answers about what my priorities are. But I think it is really important to me. I don't have all the answers. And I want your listeners and viewers to understand, like, I know that I don't have all the answers.
Right.
I'm going to offer my answers.
Right.
And I'm going to try and do the best that I can.
Right.
But I also want to have a system where everybody has a seat at the table.
Let's talk about it.
Everybody should have a seat at the table.
Let's talk
Because
about
that's
it.
how we get to our best answers. Now, let me answer your question. I'm not trying to dodge your question. You know what's really hard? Well, there's a few things. Change is hard. It is also, you know what else is really hard? Being poor is really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to get around. It's hard to just make the ends meet. It's hard. Like, we should make it less hard for people.
Right.
Just because I think we have a moral obligation to do that as a society. That's how I read the Bible. That's the example I see Jesus setting for us. But it is also, I think, just in all of our best interest.
Right.
It set aside the morality of it. If you just want to look at objectively speaking, man, we're cheating ourselves of stuff because that girl in Casey isn't going to have the opportunity to contribute to the world in the way that she could potentially. Right? Like, that's I think the way to have this conversation is not, who's a jerk and who's bad and who's
Right.
morally bankrupt. But hey, man, how about we create more opportunities for more people to do more great things? Because we're all going to be better off if that's the case.
Right.
I don't think people are going to say, "Oh, no. I don't want more people to have opportunities."
Yeah.
Who's going to say that? No. I would rather not have the
Yeah.
next amazing, beautiful piece of art created.
Right.
I don't want that.
Right.
Okay, let's frame the conversation that way.
Yeah.
What could we be doing? What could our society be doing?
No, that's a great way to frame it. And again, as our next potential mayor, as I think the mayoral or just mayoral administration in general is a convener, right? So bringing in those people when, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I know you work very closely and have a different proximity to this community than I do. What should be done? How can we support you to support them? And I think that's a crucial role for the mayoral's administration in general, to be able to identify those partners and also be able to resource them, right? Invest, right, in those partners. So it's good to kind of hear you unpack that a little bit as well. Keeping it in community a little bit. Let's go to this crime. Let's go to policing. Well, let me rephrase that. Let's go to public safety. Because, you know, public safety is more than just policing, and that way, framed that way, it gives you an opportunity to unpack public safety and kind of what that means for you and probably as our next potential mayor as well. So when you think about public safety, what does that mean and how does that look going forward potentially for the next 4 years?
Amen. So my 3 priorities, things that are most important to me, are public education, public safety, and quality of life.
Okay.
And words matter, right? It's not crime. It's
Right.
public safety.
Right.
It's how do we prevent bad things from happening in the first place? And I mean bad things.
Matt. You hitting something now.
How do we prevent bad things from happening in the first place?
How do we prevent it? I would love to hear your. Well, I have an idea, but
I want to hear your idea.
I'm curious of what you're gonna say.
Yeah.
I'm curious because we have to spend money.
So here's the thing. I believe that people are rational actors.
Okay.
Now, I'm using this language, this is not like political language, but I'm hopeful that the people who are watching this,
they know deeply. We talking.
are people who are digging deep anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like, people are rational actors, right? That person who commits a crime is probably doing it. Every situation is different. Every human being is different. But we can't spend like all day doing 705,000 different things, right? Like
Right.
you have to have systems.
Right.
You have to have structures.
Right.
I believe that people are rational actors. They're making decisions. They may make the wrong decision, but they're doing what they think is in their best interest. The person who commits a crime is doing it because they don't think they have any better options.
Right.
We need to create systems and structures so they have better options.
Right.
And I am not justifying people who commit horrific crimes. People must be held accountable.
Right.
I must be held accountable. You must be held accountable.
Right.
Each of us must be held accountable. And I think we can set up systems and structures where more people truly have more options to make more good decisions. We're going to have a better society.
Right. What role does the mayor play into that?
A variety of things. We talked a little bit about public education.
Right.
It's making sure that that is setting people up, truly setting people up to be able to have a good opportunity, a good outcome. You may be interested in math. I may be interested in English. She may be interested in science. He may be interested in art. We're all different, right? So there need to be more pathways for more good opportunities. I believe having more good opportunities to do more good things. Kids, most kids, I think almost all kids, don't come out of the womb saying, yeah, I'm going to go be a bank robber.
Right.
I'm going to come out of here and be a murderer, right? There are things that led those people to those positions. We can take more opportunities to create more pathways for them to do more good things.
Right.
That is hard. It's not easy. This is long form conversation.
Yeah.
There ain't enough time, even in this conversation, if we're going to talk about any more than one thing and keep your viewers' attention for even a little bit. I mean, but it is about that. Is it about investing so that every kid has the opportunity to engage and fulfill what their full potential is.
Right.
We have to do that.
Right.
We've got to make those investments
Right.
because it's the right thing to do,
Right.
but because it will make our world a better place. I believe that so deeply. But it is not all carrots. It ain't all carrots.
Right.
We got to have some sticks too.
Right.
And people have to be held accountable. I think those are important things.
Right.
In parenting, as you know, I got 6 kids and stepkids. Man, every kid's different.
Yeah.
You got to meet the kid where they are. But people need to be invested. We need to invest in people and invest in their success like it's our own success, because it is our own success.
What is your thoughts on the investment of more money in policing? Buzzwords like defund the police, reallocate funds, things like that have happened over the last couple of years. But like here in Nashville, we know it's a lot of gun thefts, a lot of youth violence. It's a slippery slope with many communities with SROs in schools, school resource officers in schools. Just the presence of police affects different communities differently. What are your thoughts on our current state of policing in Nashville? And would you have plans, especially when it comes around a budget? Do you feel that we need more money invested in police? And if so, where does that money need to go to? Is it potentially just more people power because we're short officers, or is it in specific things that you would like police to do here in the city?
We need to have less crime in our city. I think everyone can agree on that, right? So let's start with where we want to go. Let's start with the goal, right? Crime is bad. That sounds like a pretty obvious thing to say, but we still have more and more of it. Well, why do we have more and more of it? I think there's a variety of reasons. We need to prevent those things from happening in the first place. So how do we do that? The events of March 27th, and I don't know when folks will be watching this, but that was a horrific day in our city's history, the shooting at Covenant.
Right.
If there was one glimmer of bright light on that horrific, dark day, it was seeing how bravely and professionally some of our police officers responded.
Right.
They went into a very uncertain situation and put themselves in harm's way to save kids.
Right.
And many of our police officers, the overwhelming majority of our police officers, do that every day.
Right.
And I start from that position.
Okay.
Now, I am not saying that we are all perfect. That is not the case. Again, folks need to be held accountable. That is not just people who commit crimes, but that is also people who are trying to protect us, but may make some wrong decisions.
Right.
I am not a defund the police person. I do not think that we need to defund the police. I think we need to fund smart programs to prevent crimes from happening in the first place.
Okay.
There's a lot of mental health challenges in our society right now.
Right.
A lot.
Right.
And I want to applaud the great work that our sheriff is doing, Sheriff Hall, to help meet people where they are and give them the help that they need. I think we need to fund programs, so starting from the very beginning, there are more pathways to more kids making more good decisions so they don't get on a pathway. Nobody, we were saying this, that there are, I don't want to say nobody, absolutes, 100% statements are not usually the right statements to make. But most people
Right.
are just trying to make it through
Yeah.
this, right? You mentioned gun thefts. There are hundreds of guns stolen out of cars.
Right.
Why? Because people aren't securing them.
Right.
People need to secure their weapons. If they have them, and that is a huge thing to have a gun, then you need to do everything you can to make sure that it is protected and that people are safe.
Right.
We need to do that. But we also need to make sure that people are genuinely protected, feel safe. They don't need to be protected, not only protected by the police, they need to feel protected from the police, right? We need to do that. People need to be met in a good place. And I think the best way to do that is to get police officers out of their cars, into the streets, building relationships with the community. I believe that Chief Drake is the right leader for our police department. We need to be doing a good job, a better job of having opportunities for people to have positive interactions with our police department.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, no,
there's a lot to unpack even behind that.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to unpack. Because how the covenant situation was just unfortunate, and many people. It's crazy how the media, right? Media, because mass shootings are like, and school shootings is like 1% of gun violence, right?
How many murders were there in our city?
Right.
Last year.
Was that
Right?
was that like
Over 100?
Yep.
Right?
And so it's
That
like
is every day.
and so that doesn't get the same media attention for
No.
whatever reason, or domestic violence,
Domestic
abuse of other
violence.
violence through gun violence, right? And so it just it's funny in a non-funny way, kind of how the perceptions of violence in general can change depending on the situation. Again, like you mentioned, mental health situation, and mental health situations. I think this is a perfect one, because you have a situation like Covenant, where police comes in and save people from a mass shooter. But then you have other situations that have happened in our city and nationally where somebody's having a mental health crisis.
Yes.
Police show up, and then they are killed, unfortunately, by police because of
That happened in our city
And
on
so-
Buchanan Street,
and people-
I think, and
and-
other
yeah,
times
and other
on
times.
interstates.
And then and so the conversation changes, like, okay, like how the response should be different in those cases, right?
Yes.
And so it's like, how do we have these services? How do we get those resources? And even from an emergency communications standpoint,
Yes.
how can we call in and from a resident and code it like, hey, I know this person, they live in my community, they out willing the gun, but I know they have a huge mental health issue, so I don't think he or she's gonna harm anybody. So when you all come, like, try some type of other de-escalation other than killing a citizen, right? And so I think
Yes.
that's just like around policing, figuring that out, but also being able to call it out and have a transparent conversation about it. I think also that's where we can start as a city, and as a next potential mayor, be able to start some of that dialogue too with community members that's trying to figure out, like, hey, like, yeah, we want to feel protected, but at the same time, we have to have an understanding that every situation is different, and de-escalation sometimes don't look the same when police officers show up. It can be escalated just because of the air, right? Right, exactly.
Look, this is a really hard conversation to have, and it is, again, I want to follow the people, the
Yeah.
lived experience
Yeah.
of people who are engaging in these ways.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, really hard.
Yeah.
It is really hard. And that doesn't mean we run away from it.
Right.
It means we run into it. We
Right.
run towards the hard things.
Right.
And I think it is vital. I think the police are doing some really good things to invest in programs to bring mental health professionals to these crisis situations to de-escalate them.
Right.
We should be protected.
Right.
There are a lot of people out here who should not have weapons of death.
Right.
Guns kill people.
Right.
People kill people.
Right.
People use guns to kill people.
Right.
We need to de-escalate those situations. There
Yeah.
are a lot of people out here who have weapons because they've stolen them or been able to buy them from people who've stolen them out of cars. That should not be happening. And let me applaud some of the positive efforts that have been made in our legislature. Our legislature is doing a lot of things wrong. I want to encourage them to create more situations where there are more opportunities for more good things to happen and fewer bad things to happen. That sounds obvious, but it ain't happening.
You have this community and economic development background, and I actually have that background too.
Yes.
It's one of the things we have in common.
Yep.
And as we look at the city, it's a lot of economic and community development happening. One of those developments is the Titan Stadium. And the city, I should say, was going to get back a lot of land usage for the East Bank. So I want to dive into kind of what would that development or opportunities for development or take part in their development from an economic growth standpoint, small businesses, virtual businesses, small, big, large, how can we make sure that it benefits community, right? Because I think that was the biggest question mark for many people on maybe why they did not want the stadium new deal, because it's like, how does this benefit like me? I'm not a contractor. I don't have a restaurant. I'm not a hotel owner.
I may not be able to afford tickets
right.
to the Titans games.
Right.
Right.
And so
how is that going to help me?
How does that help us as Nashvillians and people that live in the Nashville, Davidson County and surrounding counties? How does this stadium? What's the mayor's potential role in making sure it does benefit Nashvillians?
I feel in some ways like a broken record, right? But it is also because each of these things, we need to set up more opportunities for more good things to happen.
Yeah.
That is true in education, that is true in public safety,
Right.
and it is true in economic development.
Right.
It is about negotiating good deals on the front end,
Right.
and then having follow-up, holding people accountable.
Right.
That is not just true in public safety, it is also true in economic development.
Right.
It is setting up systems and structures
Yeah.
for these things to happen in a good way.
Right.
Negotiating affordable housing in the soccer stadium. You know what's going up right now? Affordable housing at the soccer stadium. There has to be follow-up and accountability on each of these things. And that is true for the East Bank, for the Titans deal, for the area around that. That is what has to happen. And there are a lot of people who feel like a lot of things have happened for far too long
Right.
that have not actually benefited our city.
Right.
And we have to make sure that happens. So we can get into all the specifics on it. I think, look, I am someone who believes that you have to be a person of your word.
Okay.
It starts with that.
Okay.
Got to be a person of your word, and our city has to be accountable and a person of its word, a
Right.
city of its word as well.
Right.
And so, for far too long, that was not happening.
Right.
We got to make sure that happens. It happens at East Bank. It happens at Titan Stadium. We got to do that going forward.
Right.
And so that deal has now been approved, as
Right.
you know, right? That deal's been approved. It is approved.
It's happening.
Now we got to make sure that it happens for the best interest of the city, and the things that happen there are productive and positive for our city,
Right.
and don't make us worse off but better off.
Small businesses, and I will even get more specific. Minority, people of color, black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, struggled during the pandemic, and in a thriving city like Nashville, we see all the cranes going up, right? And it can be easy to forget about the small businesses. They're really, I feel, are the heart and soul of a city like Nashville. Have you thought about any initiatives, plans, or are there things already in existence that you want to just kind of make more robust to really push into our small businesses and our black and minority-owned businesses here in Nashville? Because, you have black voters, people of color voters, minority voters that's going to be really looking at that. The initiatives like, hey, we know that we are underserved or forgotten or neglected in this area specifically. What is our next mayor saying about that specifically, so we can get a piece of this pie that's out there, and not just kind of always focusing on the large Amazons and Alice Bernsteins and the Oracles and things of that nature.
Not only have I thought about it, I've been about it. I have actually done it.
Okay.
We should judge these folks who are coming before the voters
Right.
by their track records.
Right.
And that is not to say that I am perfect or any of us is.
Right.
We all can get better.
But you're just saying you're better at the moment.
We all can get better.
Yeah.
But judge us by our track records.
Right. Right.
I served in the mayor's office, as you know. And I created with the help of many people, we created the very first small business incentive program in our city's history, and as best we could tell, the first one like it in the country. It was a priority, and we implemented it. I worked with then Councilman Jerry Maynard and with some of the council members, Fabian Bedney and Sharon Hurt and Freddie O'Connell, 2 other candidates running for mayor, to actually do these things. We worked on implementing these programs. We have created these programs. And so it is great to focus on the, as you said, the Alliance Bernsteins and these other things. And in total jobs, you got to create jobs. But you know who are the real job creators? The small businesses. And that is hard to do. You have to do the work. You have to be willing to put in the effort. I have done the work. I have put in the effort. And I will do more as mayor.
I'm going to throw another word out there for you. And I want you to just kind of unpack it and what it means to you. Nashville is a mayor-led city, you know, top executive spot of the city of leadership. So that comes with a lot of power, right? People view power differently. How do you view the term power?
I believe in servant leadership.
Okay.
Your viewers may have a variety of different religions, and I want to respect all religions. I am Christian, and I believe in servant leadership. Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. That is the example that inspires me. Now, each of us can be inspired, but you're asking what inspires me, how I view leadership. That is how I view leadership. That is what I believe I can do the best to lead our city. And so I am inspired by that. I am not putting myself on that level in any way. I am nowhere near that. But I am inspired to lead in that way, and I am humbled by it, and I want to be a humble servant leader for our city. Truly, every day. So, you know what I'm really pissed off about?
What is that?
I'm really pissed off about all the trash in our city. I'm really pissed off about it. That's not somebody else's problem. That is my problem. And so, I get up, and when I go running in the morning, a lot of mornings, I will take a bag with me. I'll take a trash bag with me and pick up trash along the way. Because that is the difference that I can make. That is not the full solution. We also need to make sure that our systems and our structures are functioning in good ways so that there aren't a bunch of full trash cans from which the wind is blowing trash into the streets. Those need to be picked up every week, on time. And also, I and our neighbors need to be doing our part to pick up the trash.
That's what I'm going to say.
That is an example in one area of what we can be doing. It ain't somebody else's problem. It's my problem. What can I do?
Speaking of problems.
And there are many.
We talked about it in the beginning, but I definitely want for you to hit on this city-state relationship, and kind of what our next mayor needs to possess, have, understand to be able to have a relationship with the state, a healthy one, that will allow us to move forward, get funding for things. Things are not preempted all the time when they go to the state, or it's not, aggressive acts towards the city from the state, or vice versa. But we can have a healthy relationship. What does that look like to you? What are your plans? What are your strategies in trying to tackle that? And then we have just 2 more questions left, and we're gonna wrap it up.
Great. Hey man, I'll stay here all day, all night. I mean, because I love it, but more importantly, because it's needed on the state relationship. I am also frustrated about that. I'm frustrated about the trash and but I am frustrated about our relationship with the state. We are sitting here just a few blocks away from our state's capital and a few blocks away from the mayor's office.
Right.
Well, folks who are working that close to each other ought to have a much better relationship.
Down the street.
That ain't rocket scientists. That's rocket science. We should have a better relationship. Now, it is not that easy.
Right.
It's not as easy as just saying it, speaking it into existence. It is about doing the work.
Yep.
It is about doing the work. So, what can the mayor do? This is, as you said earlier, a strong mayor system. It is also true that the state constitution, as it is written, cities are political subdivisions of the state. That is just the truth.
Yep.
We can argue it's good or it's bad, and we should work to change things that are not set up in a good way. Again, this issue of systems and structures. But the reality is the city is a political subdivision of the state, and we need to do the hard work to build a relationship, in particular with the people with whom we do not agree or always see eye to eye.
Right.
Man, it's easy to have a conversation with my friends.
Right. Yeah. That's cool.
It's easy to hang out with people who agree with me.
Right. Yeah.
Or tweet at people who already agree with the situation that I agree with. That is easy.
Yeah.
You know what's hard? Sitting down with someone who pisses me the F off.
Yeah.
In many ways, this conversation is not the conversation that we need to be having.
Right.
It is easy to talk with people you agree with. So, I think that we need to sit down and do the work to talk with people with whom we do not agree.
Okay.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
But it is vital
Yeah.
for our city and for our state. Because you know what happened? When you went out today and you bought lunch, you were paying for the teachers in Obion County and Ray County and Hamlin County.
Yeah.
So I think that the mayor needs to sit down with the men and women in our state legislature and build better relationships with them. And that is not to say that we will always agree.
Right. That's not life.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
That is not to say that you should ever compromise on your most important principles.
Right.
But is it about sitting down and working through these things? Because it's a heck of a lot easier to hate someone who you don't have a relationship with.
Right.
It is a lot harder to hate somebody you know. And so we got to sit down and do the work. And when we disagree, listen
Yeah.
and talk and try and figure it out. And when we can't agree, that's okay.
Right.
But we've got to move forward.
Right.
And by doing that, I think we are more likely to have more positive outcomes, a better relationship with the state, find opportunities to invest on the things that we do agree with. That is the only way I know how to do it.
Right.
I can yell and scream at these people as much as I want.
Right.
And you know what's not likely to happen? For them to say, oh, wow, Matt, you yelled at me so loudly for so long, I now totally don't do the thing that I was going to do because you yelled so loudly at me.
Yeah.
I'm now going to agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen, and so I am not going to do that.
This is usually like the last question that I formally ask, and it kind of I ask it because I really want people to understand the importance of budget and understanding this financial responsibility as mayor should. But you have the track record. It's not one of those things I really need to like really talk to you about in a sense. But if you want to mention anything, yeah. But if you just, and the reason I say this is because again we have it's a lot of people who may not understand the job, not understand the kind of the real kind of things that the mayor really does and has really big decision making power of, and the budget is one of those things, right? And so especially for a lot of new Nashvillians, and because a lot of people, like they don't participate in the participatory budget, or when that and
but they should,
and
I want more of them too.
And they waiting. We all wait until the budget is almost done, and then we say, "Hey, hold on, wait a minute."
Wait.
And so
it's too late.
And so
at that
if
point,
you wanted to say anything about the budget or just even your background on understanding on knowing how to manage a $3 billion operational budget, like I just want to give you that opportunity.
yeah. I mean, look, it's really hard. It is really, really hard. But I want everybody to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Everyone should have a seat at the table. And you know what? That is really messy and really complicated and really confusing. But we all got to do that.
Right.
And I invite everyone to do that. I will also invite you all to have a conversation together with all of us. And I am a big fan of what I've already mentioned him once. I'll mention him again. Fabian Bedney is doing with the participatory budgeting, as you mentioned. You brought it up. You nearly know. You obviously know about it.
Yeah.
I would invite everyone to be as engaged as you are.
Yeah.
And I will say this. I don't want to be sanctimonious or a jerk about this. I don't want to say who can or can't yell about what. You can all yell about all you want.
Right.
But I would really say it's pretty unproductive to yell about something that you have not done anything about.
Yeah.
So let's all do it.
Yeah.
Because we can.
Exactly.
Because we are in the greatest country in the world, and we actually can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's do it, man. Let's do it. You and me, let's go.
In the best
let's
city,
go.
in the best city in the world, I would add. Matt, I want to give you an opportunity to touch on anything that maybe we didn't touch on, that you want to extrapolate on, or just, leave, kind of just lasting words or whatnot for the potential voters and people that are watching and listening.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
I just want to say thank you.
No, you're welcome. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel incredibly lucky. I want us all
Yeah.
to feel incredibly lucky. I feel incredibly lucky because I, like you, feel like I live in the greatest city in America,
Yeah.
and I think we can make it even better.
Definitely.
It ain't all working right
Right.
today, but it can be better
Right.
tomorrow.
Right.
A little bit better if we're willing to do the work.
If we don't get this right in voting for our next mayor, what is the consequences?
I mean, it's not going to be as good as it should be
Okay.
for that girl living in Casey or any of us, man. We can do this. We can do better. So let's go do better.
Where can people go to support your campaign, find you, ask you more questions, just catch you in events? How can people do that?
Yeah. First way, Wiltshire.com.
Okay.
I hope it'll be on the screen at some
Yeah.
point. www.wiltshire.com.
Okay.
My email is my name at Wiltshire.com. Matthew at Wiltshire.com. My cell phone number is 615-483-4716. I definitely shouldn't be saying that,
Definitely.
and I definitely will be saying that. Come on, let's go do this together, all of us. Thank you.
If you win this mayoral race, I'm pretty sure that number probably will change.
Nope. Nope.
Hey man, I just got your number. Jerome gave it to me.
Look. Here's the thing. I have said this. I mean, look. This is like the extra time version or whatever, right? As you said, I spent a lot of time recruiting companies to come here, and they would always say, "Oh man, now that we have decided that we're going to come here, what should we do?" Nashville is the kind of city where you can get a first meeting with anyone.
Right.
I think that.
Yeah,
I think you can get a first meeting with anyone.
I agree.
It may take a little bit of time, and you may have to talk to this person, that person's sister's cousin, whatever. You can get a first meeting. What I say to people is, it is vital, Drum, when you are the mayor of America and the president of this and that, right? I hope that you will do that for the next person. That you will give the first meeting to the next person.
Right.
And if we do that, we will be a better city, we will be a better country, and we will be a better world.
Matt, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck on the campaign, and I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing each other soon.
Oh,
again.
for sure.